Adverbs and adjectives are the next part of speech that the textbook goes into greater detail about. And again, I couldn't help myself. Here's some more pictures from Grammar House Rock. Give them a look. They're so great. These are my two favorites, as I've already said. I love the adverbs and the adjectives. The songs are just so cute. Anyway, I've subjected my own kids to these, and they look at me like I'm crazy. So, if you look at me like I'm crazy, I guess I don't have to know. But again, they really are helpful, so give them a try. All right, adjectives and adverbs. Here we go. All right, so adjectives is where we're going to start. They describe or limit nouns. They're a describing word. Don't forget about the articles. They count as adjectives. And they pretty much, they come before a noun or after a linking verb. Don't forget that you can have adjective phrases, and these are dependent clauses. So as we stated previously, you have independent clauses which stand alone, dependent clauses which don't. So watch out for fragments. Don't just create an adjective phrase and leave it hanging there. You want to make sure you have a verb to go with it. So again, just watch out for fragments. I think that's all I wanted to mention on this one. Right? Yeah, we'll go into more detail later. Okay, so modifier errors. When it comes to adjective phrases, in this case, sometimes there are some errors that occur, and the bummer about them, at least with misplaced modifiers, they're really, really difficult to spot sometimes, especially in your own writing, because when you're writing, your brain naturally fills in the gaps. So when you read a sentence fragment, your mind is kind of filling that in if you're not super careful about it. That's why one really good tool I can suggest for editing your papers is to go backwards one sentence at a time. That takes the because have you ever noticed when you read your own paper straight through, you kind of go brain dead and you're not really paying attention to what you're doing. You're just kind of either rattling it off if you're reading out loud, or you're just skimming the page. So if you read it backwards, it can help with that, even though I found that when I've done that, I can still go brain dead. So one of the best ways to catch errors is to read it out loud, to work backwards, or to have someone else look at it. They're going to notice a fragment sooner than you are, more than likely, because they don't know what you're saying. They have to read it to understand, whereas you don't. You know what you're trying to say. So anyway, misplaced modifiers, again, can be really difficult to see. It occurs when a modifier is not placed right next to the word that it's modifying, and that's why it's tricky. So in this sentence, lost in space, the scientists got no response from the robot probe. Your brain kind of fills in the gap. You know what you mean when you write that. You mean that the robot probe is what's lost in space, but it's the scientists who are getting no response. The problem is that the sentence insinuates that it's the scientists that are lost in space, which doesn't make any sense. Well, it does. I mean, I suppose scientists could get lost in space, but in this case, it's the robot that is lost in space. So, easy fix, you flip them and rework the sentence, or just revise the sentence completely. Sometimes you'll just find an error that's so yucky that you're like, forget it, I'm just going to start over. So again, be really careful with these, because you know what you mean, but the person reading it will make the connection between lost in space and the scientists, not between lost in space and the probe. Dingling modifiers are similar. It's when whatever's being modified isn't even included in the sentence. So the second one seems more obvious to me. Overspending with credit cards, the debt increased. Okay, so what word is being modified? Not the debt, because the debt can't spend. So these are really, and sadly they're common. They're just harder to spot. So go slow, be very careful, and I will do my best to spot them for you. And you can just revise them. But this is how adjective phrases can cause issues in your sentences. So sometimes adjectives require certain punctuation. and that is a comma. So if you have more than one adjective, sometimes you need a comma between the two. So I provided an example here and given you 2 tests that you can use, that the textbook outlines them as well. These aren't mine. So the large hairy rodent scurried across the floor. Large is an adjective. Hairy is an adjective. How do you know if a comma is needed? For the first test, put the word and in between. The large and hairy rodent scurries across the floor. It's nice that I can spell floor. That's cool. Whatever. If the word and fits and is still grammatical, you need a comma. The other test is the switch test. You switch the adjectives around. So instead of the large hairy, down here we have the hairy large rodent scurried across the floor. If they can switch and the sentence still makes sense and is grammatical, you need a comma. Okay, so those are 2 tests to help you determine whether or not you need a comma between the adjectives. I think one example in the book mentions something about delicious Thai food. Thai is technically an adjective. It's describing what type of food. But if you switch Thai and delicious, it wouldn't make any sense. I want some Thai delicious food. So you don't need a comma. Thai food is a specific thing. Okay? So that's when you wouldn't need a comma. All right, so adverbs. Woohoo! They describe or limit verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. They tell you when, where, how, and to what degree. And as I've said before, a lot of them end in ly. They can be tricky, though. Excuse me, my goodness. Yesterday at noon probably doesn't stand out to you very quickly as being an adverb, but it describes when I ran. So, quickly describes how I ran. Yesterday at noon describes when I ran. And they can appear anywhere in the sentence, so you don't have to really get hung up on where they're going to pop up, because you can put them anywhere. But as I've got right here, they can be phrases. So this isn't just a single word like quickly. It's a group of 3 words that functions together as an adverb. The common adverb errors we encounter the most are double negatives. And of course, they don't make no sense. It's something that we tend to hear people say. They're not very frequently written, but we write how we speak. So you still have to be careful about them. And yes, they are correct. If you say, I don't have no dogs, it technically means you do have dogs. So you really don't want to do a double negative. You're contradicting yourself. Also, you don't want to use adjectives as adverbs and vice versa. So technically, if somebody says, how are you doing? You would technically need to say, I am doing well. Because well is an adverb, and it modifies am. I am well, not I am good. But if you say, I am good at soccer, that makes sense. It's describing how good you are at a sport. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So good, well, bad, badly, there's a number that the book outlines. So try to be aware of those. It'll make you sound more intelligent when you meet people too. If they shake your hand and say, how are you today? And you say, I am well, you're going to sound so much more educated. I know, go figure. So improving through your modifiers, most of all, you want to try to avoid the errors that I've mentioned. I believe there were 4 of them, 2 for the adjectives and 2 for adverbs. So do your best to avoid those. That's a really good start. But you also want to make sure that you are using adverbs and adjectives appropriately to add detail. You don't want to go overboard in the detail you're providing. You want to be direct and concise, but descriptive at the same time. And the textbook gives some examples on sentences that are just overboard in modifiers. So you need modifiers. You want to add richness to what you're trying to say and to what you're writing. But if you go beyond what's appropriate, you're going to do more damage than good. So you've got to find a balance. In academic writing, you tend to need to be just very direct, spit out the information and get on with it. But description is good too. So use it consciously, use it purposefully, and be very aware. Again, always be aware of what you're writing. That's why writing is so hard and so important. You've got to be able to look at what you're doing and why you are doing it. And look to other writing samples and how they can balance being direct and descriptive at the same time. It'll help move your writing along and add some richness to it without, going overboard and boring your reader by going, oh my gosh, just get on with it. So, as always, if you have any questions, let me know. Use the practice in the textbook to get a better grasp of it. Use the activities that I don't assign to practice and gauge how well you're understanding it. And hopefully you'll get it.